From the Times and the Sunday Times, this is The Story. I'm Manveen Rana. On some stories, it's best to go directly to the experts.
Hi, my name is Poppy, I'm 14, I'm from Sydney, and this is my perspective on the social media ban.
Ask any young Australian about the country becoming the first in the world to ban under-16s from social media, and they'll have a view. Poppy, a relative of one of our team, certainly does.
Keeping young people safe online is incredibly important. However, I believe this decision wasn't fully thought through, and the impact on young people's well-being and everyday lives hasn't been considered deeply enough.
Some teenagers claim it's Orwellian, silencing their voices on public platforms. Others talk about how social media brings them connection.
I've moved around a lot growing up, and maintaining those relationships would have been almost impossible without platforms that let me keep in touch. I genuinely worry that cutting young people off their online support networks could increase mental health struggles. For some, social media is an escape, a place to feel understood, and a way to reach out when they're struggling.
Many are so affronted by the ban that they're already finding ways to ignore it.
In reality, many teens have already found ways around the restrictions. It's actually quite easy to bypass the system.
So will this new law work? Is it even enforceable? And what do we do to protect young people from online bullying and grooming and algorithms which keep them addicted to their phones?
There absolutely should be stronger protections, better education, and more tools to keep young people safe online. But taking everything away isn't the answer.
So what is the answer? Will a social media ban make a difference? And if it works in Australia, could it be the template for countries all over the world? The story today: Australia's social media experiment. This is an issue that's divided opinion, so we're going to hear from a number of voices, not just a teenager, but a parent and a politician. But first, our man on the ground, Bernard Lagan.
I am the Australian correspondent for The Times.
Ben, this social media ban has been talked about for so long. It's finally here. What's the response been like? I mean, what's the mood like in Sydney as this is about to begin?
Well, this polling came out this week, conducted by the Sydney Morning Herald and the Melbourne Age. It's probably the largest poll to be conducted on this. We find that nearly 70% of people back the ban, but only 35% are confident that the social media platforms will be able to effectively block users under 16. Only a third of parents also will fully enforce it. That is, they won't be actively removing apps from their phones of young teens and children, even though those apps are banned. Now, a year ago, it was only 58% of people say they're in favour of the ban. So I think the government can fairly say that support for the ban is growing as time goes by.
And Ben, just talk us through the intricacies of this law. I mean, what happens if the ban isn't working? Is there a penalty for the tech companies?
Yes, there is. There's a very large penalty. So that the tech companies are required to take all reasonable steps to ensure that account holders aged under 16 are booted off those platforms and that they do not rejoin until they are 16 years old. And if they are found to have not taken reasonable steps, then they will be liable for fines of up to $50 million Australian. So it's a large amount of money. The tech companies have agreed to start booting people off, and Instagram and Meta also booted quite a lot off. They are complying. So the affected platforms include Snapchat, which is an estimated 440,000 Australian users aged under 16. Instagram, which has 350,000 users aged under 16. TikTok with 200,000. and Facebook with 150,000 under 16. And others include Kick, Reddit, X, formerly Twitter, YouTube, and Threads. So that gives you an idea of the scale of it. Now, the government reserves the right to add social media platforms to that list if they so wish. If they believe other social media platforms pose a danger to young people, then they will be added to the list. And as an example, YouTube was initially told by the government they would not be on the list, but now they are, and they are very, very unhappy about it.
And what's the onus is clearly on the tech companies here to stop children being able to access their platforms. How is that supposed to work? How is it actually going to be enforced?
The tech companies have algorithms that can tell, they say, which of the users are under 16. If they find that accounts are not being used during school hours, they tend to assume that that account has been operated by a school-aged child. They also have algorithms which will review material posted by users onto their sites, which they say can help them decide if a user is aged under 16 or not. That's the kind of yardsticks they're using to boot people off their platform.
I mean, it doesn't sound comprehensive.
They say it is, but the issue is going to be when a kid is booted off, say, and decides, I want to get back on, what do? Well, they can appeal, and then the companies are likely to use new technology called age verification technology. So you'll be asked to post a selfie to the platform, and the platform will use technology to decide whether that photograph, that selfie, is a 16-year-old person or a younger person. The other way that tech companies will do this, they will be entitled to ask you for a government ID, such as a school record, perhaps a birth certificate or something like that, which asserts that you're over 16 years old if you wish to stay on.
And do we think this age verification technology, is it effective?
As you can imagine, that has certainly been road tested by various newspapers here over the last couple of weeks. And there have been a number of stories showing that teenagers have been able to fool that technology simply by using their own photograph, or more likely, obtaining a photograph of a relative or a friend or someone older than themselves and passing that off as their own photograph.
Are parents, are they likely to try and encourage this ban to work? I mean, you said that the polling shows they do support it. Will they be helping to enforce it?
They will be required by law, in a sense, because it will be illegal for parents to open an account on behalf of their children. So a parent, strictly speaking, cannot open an account under their own name just for their children to use. Now, how you actually establish that a parent has done that and then take enforcement action against them remains to be seen. But to a degree, parents are being compelled to cooperate.
How do parents feel about the ban? We decided to ask one.
My name's Jo, and I'm a teacher and a copywriter, and I have a 12-year-old and a 10-year-old child, and I am very much on board with this. I think the exposure of social media is very, very concerning for kids now. You know, they deserve the room to grow without an audience, and I even get pulled into it sometimes. And, I think I'm not trying to wrap them in cotton wool or anything. I just want them to be safe, and I'm really concerned about them being tossed into a world that even grown-ups struggle with.
Your kids are still quite young, 10 and 12. How much are they already using the phone?
Actually, my daughter has my old phone, and she uses it at home with Wi-Fi. So I'm in the house generally when she has it. She doesn't take it out with her. She doesn't have data yet. But she does access YouTube, and even though I'm kind of, floating around and watching things, it's an open platform. Anything can happen on there.
And do you think it'll be easy to enforce? Do you think it'll actually work, or can you imagine kids like yours finding ways around it?
I think there will definitely be children and families that won't value the issue as much or understand or even police it as well as others. A lot of parents that I know and a lot of teachers that I know are all very, very interested in how this is going to go down, because there are a lot of kids with social media now, and people are just starting to become really aware of how much it's affecting kids and their screen time. And, you know, they're designed to keep you scrolling for hours, and they're already under so much pressure trying to make real life friends and stay awake and all of that kind of thing. And there will be people that do get around it. But I think it'd be very interesting to see what happens.
And with this sort of change coming in, some people are arguing that actually it's for parents to police how much their children are online, not the governments to be stepping into this, and that actually by changing the law, it slightly sort of takes parents out of the equation, allows them to feel like their children are safe even when they might not be. I mean, do you worry about that?
I do, actually, because yes, it does make parents think that it's the government issue, but it's going to be a very difficult thing because there are a lot of adults that are obviously in the same boat, addicted to the scrolling. I think that, it's very hard to make a judgment on who's in charge of what, but it certainly would make it easier for parents to enforce if they can turn around and say to their children and their families, well, it's against the law and you're not supposed to be doing that. It makes it easier for them. But I certainly think that it is a parent's responsibility in the end, and not the school's responsibility either entirely. I think we all have a bit of a role to play all together.
Ben, just take us back to how all of this began. Why is the government bringing this ban in? What was their argument for this? What was the need they felt?
So what happened was, a couple of years ago, there were a series of quite tragic, very tragic suicides of very young people who had been bullied on social media.
Emma Mason spoke about the importance of our upcoming ban on social media for children under the age of 16. Her 15-year-old daughter, Tilly, committed suicide after years of online abuse on almost every social media platform.
Social media played a big part in Ollie's passing. I believe his story was multifaceted, but once that disordered eating started, social media fed it, and it absolutely positively fueled it.
It appalled people that this had happened to these young people. Those deaths got a lot of attention, and so did social media's role in those deaths. And the parents of those children were understandably very vocal about their feelings and views about social media. And politicians began to respond to parental concerns that there may be more of these. And in particular, the Sydney Daily Telegraph, which is a big selling newspaper here in Sydney, they launched a campaign to seek a ban, and the politicians reacted to that. So there was a bit of timing issue here that worked quite well for advocates of a ban, because this thing reached a crescendo just ahead of the Australian election. And so the opportunity was there for the government to do something about it. Anthony Albanese said that they would have a ban on under 16-year-olds.
Platforms now have a social responsibility to ensure the safety of our kids is a priority for them.
And, I mean, those concerns are global. Australia is the first to take action. How have the tech companies responded?
The tech companies have been very unhappy about it. YouTube, in particular, says that it believes the ban will do more harm than good because of the issues we just talked about, will deprive young people of the ability to communicate with each other. Some of the tech companies, in particular Meta, has said this. So many young people do not read newspapers. They don't particularly listen to radio. They don't watch television news, but they do get news off social media. and therefore those that are interested in news will be in some ways deprived. I'm not sure I buy that argument because, I mean, there's nothing to stop young people looking at these platforms. The issue is that they can't have accounts to access the platforms in the way that account holders can.
Right, so they're not being hit by the algorithms.
That's right. That's quite right. I should say the other thing about the tech companies is that Reddit today is reportedly going to launch a challenge in the Australian High Court, which is our highest court, to this legislation. Now, that will be very closely watched if it does go ahead, because if Reddit succeeds in a challenge, well, of course, that will affect every other social media platform as well. And I might also add, just while we're talking about challenges, is that some young teens have also joined, and the High Court has agreed to hear their challenge in the new year as well.
Separately.
Two teenagers have launched a High Court challenge to Australia's landmark social media ban, which will come into effect in December. 15-year-old Noah Jones and Micaela argue the law is unconstitutional and infringes on the right to free communication.
They are sort of the front people for a challenge being launched by quite a libertine internet group which disagrees with this legislation.
Australia's social media ban for under 16s comes into effect today. And as our Australia correspondent Bernard Lagan was just explaining, it's divided public and political opinion. Two teenagers are taking the Australian government to court over the policy, and they're being supported by a digital rights group led by the Honourable John Ruddick, a Libertarian politician.
I believe at face value it has noble intentions, which is to protect kids under 16 from social media harms. But we need to think through the long-term consequences of this. What's going to happen is every playground in Australia for the last 3 months has been talking about how the government's going to take away their social media, but here's a way to get around it. And they're all going to get around it. They're going to start new apps, they're going to get VPNs, or they're going to come up with something that we haven't even thought of.
John, I completely understand that, but so far this sounds like an argument for better implementation of this law, not for not having it at all.
Well, I think it's like King Canute, who tried to stop the tide. I don't think that he will be able to. And look, we'll be living with a very, very powerful government if they can absolutely insist that no person under the age of 16 is going to be able to get around it. But what I fear, they're going to get around it, and then mum and dad's going to switch off. They're going to say, we don't need to worry about our kids looking at social media now because the government's looking after it for us. So it's going to be underground social media, and it's going to be unsupervised social media. Worst of both worlds.
Although, I mean, at the moment, most parents struggle to supervise their children's use of social media, and that there are genuine concerns about online grooming, online bullying, which has even led to suicides in the past. I mean, there is a case for some kind of online safety bill, for some kind of government protection against this for people under the age of 16, where, even libertarians, you should be allowed an awful lot of rights, but after you're of an age where you can use them responsibly, I guess. So how else would you protect people under the age of 16?
Well, look, parents just say they struggle to monitor their social media. Look, parents don't struggle to give their kids food every day. And this is the paramount responsibility, is social media monitoring. It's an extremely paramount responsibility. And the schools are doing it now. The schools, my kids tell me that they have it shoved down their throat all day, every day about social media harms. The truth is, when the internet came out in the 1990s, and it was largely kids on it and not adults, bad things were happening then with predators, etc., because it was just the Wild West and people didn't understand it. But now parents who've grown up with social media do understand it. And most parents, there's always going to be parents that fail. Most parents are taking a very active role in, warning their kids about the dangers and monitoring it. I mean, my kids are on a thing called Snapchat. It's a very closed group. It's their friends from school. They talk about the movies. They talk about homework. They talk about holidays. They talk about going to the beach. It's all very wholesome.
But how much do you monitor what they're talking about?
Well, I don't want to be that intrusive, but I mean, I've been warning them from a very young age. Look, social media can be very positive. It can be enriching, but there are serious dangers. So just be super duper careful. And they show me what they do, and it all looks very harmless.
Does it worry you that so many tech giants. We keep hearing from Silicon Valley that the people who own some of these big companies that are now facing the ban, when it comes to their own children, tend to keep them off technology, keep them off social media. Does that not worry you?
I know a lot of parents who have that rule, no social media under the age of 16. And I say that's entirely understandable, and I support any parental decision. The parents know and love their kids a lot more than any bureaucrat is ever going to do so. Now, some kids, when they're like 11, are very precocious about things like physics or chemistry or whatever, IT. And some kids are going to really benefit from social media. Now, there will be some parents who think that their kid might be a little bit capable of misbehaviour, and they will, in that case, they might want to ban social media. So all the kids are very, very different. And the parents will know that there might be a kid who's going to turn out to be a nuclear physicist, win the Nobel Prize or something. Well, the more that they can go on YouTube and learn about physics, the better.
At the same time, we know that recently a lot of the tech companies have, for example, been sacking their fact checkers. So there is more and more disinformation available out there. It's not just a learning tool anymore. Isn't it good that the government is forcing the tech companies to take some responsibility by forcing them to be in charge of some of these checks on age?
Well, I think that would be solved, and it largely is solved through the free market. Now, parents aren't going to want their kids on a platform which has got a bad reputation. Now, look, in terms of misinformation and disinformation, there's been misinformation and disinformation since human beings started writing words about 5,000 years ago, and we just have to accept that's a part of life. And we can't have the government being the arbiter of all the tech giants of what's truth and what's not truth. So we want to have a maximum exchange of free ideas. And the truth will, with time, edge ahead.
Bern, with those objections from teenagers on the grounds of being stakeholders of a constitutional right, what's the government's response to that?
Well, the government essentially has not responded on that particular point. They are saving that, I think, for the court. But the government's response more broadly has been to say that the tech companies are acting in great self-interest by challenging what Australia is trying to do, that their concerns are mainly financial, that they care less about the well-being of young people, and therefore the government will not be dissuaded from going down the course which it embarks on tomorrow.
The Albanese government remains steadfastly on the side of parents and not of platforms. We will not be intimidated by threats. We will not be intimidated by legal challenges.
We're talking on the eve of the ban coming in. It's Tuesday night for you. The ban starts in a few hours. What exactly does that look like? What are you expecting? Under 16s instantly blocked? How will it work?
Strictly speaking, every person aged under 16 should not be holding an account with any of those big platforms we mentioned. When you consider it, 96% of all Australian kids under 16 have a social media account, you can see the size of the task. So there obviously will be a period of grace for the tech companies to achieve that. I think the big test is going to be when some of these kids who have been booted off attempt to get back in, and whether they are able to dupe the checking systems, which the tech companies say they have in place, to stop them returning. We'll have to see whether there is public confidence in the regime and in the testing regime and the protocols which the tech companies have set up, or whether it simply erodes away. And if that erodes away, then, there will be no doubt pressure for the government to change course.
Australia may be the first place to try this. And, you're right, in the next month or two, we might see this policy crash and burn and it'll be tidied away and then forgotten. But this might also end up being a template that the rest of the world can follow. If this does work, it could be proof of concept. Is that one of the reasons the tech companies are so worried about it?
Yes, that is one of the reasons, I think. And Australia has made no secret of its attempts to convince the rest of the world to look at this and perhaps follow it. I mean, New Zealand is one of those countries which has said it intends to follow Australia's lead. The Prime Minister of New Zealand, Christopher Luxon, has said that he's going to introduce something akin to it. And you'll know that the British government and the French government have all said that they are watching very carefully the passage of the Australian laws, and they have left open the prospect that they might also follow suit in some way. So everybody's, I think, is just on hold at the minute, waiting to see how effective the Australian legislation is. And if it is seen to be effective, then there will be a case that will build for other countries to follow. And I would imagine that will be led by parents and then politicians, in the way it happened here.
That was Bernard Lagan, the Times Australia correspondent. And before that, you heard from the Libertarian MP, John Ruddick, Joe, a parent and teacher, and right at the start from 14-year-old Poppy in Sydney. The producer today was Micaela Arneson. The executive producer was Edward Drummond. Sound design and theme composition were by Malasetto. Thanks for listening. We'll be back tomorrow.